Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the third part of 10th grade history chapter Nationalism in India. Today we will cover different opinions in the Congress after non-cooperation movement, impact of Great Depression, Simon Commission, fight for Purn Swaraj, Dandi March, brutal repression by the British, HSRA, social groups who joined the civil disobedience movement. Let's start. So after non-cooperation movement was called off, there were different opinions in the Congress party. Leaders like C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru thought maybe we should fight the British from inside the system. So they created the Swaraj Party. Their plan was to contest elections for provincial councils set up by the British under the Government of India Act 1990. Get inside those councils, oppose British policies and show people how undemocratic the system was. But not everyone agreed. Younger leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose were not impressed by council politics. They said, we don't want just reforms, we want full independence. They believed in mass struggle, not sitting in British-made council. At the same time, something big was happening around the world. The Great Depression. The Great Depression was a severe worldwide economic crisis when the stock market crash that started in the United States in 1929. It lasted throughout the 1930s, causing panic and leading to the loss of millions of jobs. In India, this meant prices of crops fell, exports collapsed, farmers couldn't sell their produce, but the British still demanded high taxes. The result? The countryside was in disorder. Farmers were angry, struggling, and ready for change. Another development was, in 1927, the new Tory government in Britain set up a Simon Commission to study how their ruling in India was working. But there was not a single Indian member on the commission. This made people furious. So when the commission arrived in 1928, Indians everywhere protested with the slogan, Simon, go back. However, these protests met with brutal repression. So much so that Lala Lajpat Rai was assaulted by the British police during one such peaceful demonstration and he lost his life due to these injuries. But for the first time, the Congress and the Muslim League united to protest. To manage the situation, Lord Irwin, the Viceroy of India, made a vague promise in 1929. So we might give India dominion status. What does that mean? Dominion status meant all laws and regulations of a country are maintained and controlled by its own citizens except for foreign relations, defense and communications. In short, India would still be under the British crown. The Indians saw through it and refused to go along. Now the radicals in the Congress took the lead. Under Jawaharlal Nehru's leadership, the Lahore Congress session of December 1929 made a historic decision. India will now fight for Purn Swaraj, complete independence. It was declared that 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as India's Independence Day, with people taking a pledge to struggle for full freedom. Look at source C. On 26 January 1930, Indian leaders declared that it was the natural rights of Indians to be free and live with dignity. They said the British government was unfair, had exploited India and taken away its freedom. Therefore, Indians decided to fight for Purn Swaraj, meaning complete independence. This pledge became a key moment in India's freedom struggle and is why we celebrate Republic Day on 26 January today. However, at that time in 1930, the celebrations didn't create much excitement. The idea of complete independence still felt too abstract for many people. They had their own local issues to deal with. So Mahatma Gandhi had to find a way to relate this abstract idea of freedom to more concrete issues of everyday life. So what did he do? He picked salt. Yes, simple salt. Why? Because everyone uses salt, rich or poor. It's essential for life and yet the British put a tax on it and kept a monopoly on its production. Gandhiji said, this is the most oppressive phase of British rule. So salt became a powerful symbol that could unite all Indians. On 31st January 1930, Gandhiji wrote a letter to Viceroy Irwin with 11 demands. These demands included reduce land revenue for peasants, protect Indian industries for industrialists, and abolish the salt tax for everyone. He gave a deadline. If the British didn't respond by 11th March 1930, he would start a civil disobedience movement. The British didn't agree. So Gandhiji set out on the famous salt march from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi, a coastal village in Gujarat. The march began on 12th March 1930 and lasted 24 days, covering 240 miles with 78 followers. Thousands joined as Gandhiji walked, explaining the idea of Swaraj, self-rule, and encouraging people to peacefully break British laws. On 6th April 1930 at Dandi, Gandhiji made salt by boiling seawater, breaking the British salt law. This was the official start of the civil disobedience movement. How was this different from the non-cooperation movement? Under non-cooperation movement in 1920s, people refused to cooperate, boycotted schools, courts, British goods. Under civil disobedience movement in 1930, people actively broke laws. They made salt, boycotted foreign clothes, picketed liquor shops, refused to pay taxes, entered forests without permission, resigned from government jobs. The British were worried. They started arresting leaders, including Abdul Ghaffar Khan. This caused massive protest in Peshawar. Arresting Gandhiji, this sparked violent reactions in Sholapur, where people attacked symbols of British rule like the police stations and court. The British responded with brutal force. Peaceful protesters were beaten, women and children included. Almost 1 lakh people were arrested. To stop the violence, Gandhiji signed a pact with Viceroy Irwin in 1931. Congress agreed to attend the Second Roundtable Conference in London. British agreed to release political prisoners. But when Gandhiji went to London, nothing really worked out. He came back disappointed. When Gandhiji returned, Nehru and Khan were in jail, the Congress was banned, protests were crushed. So Gandhiji tried to restart the movement in 1932. He continued for a while, but by 1934 it had lost momentum. While Mahatma Gandhi led the national movement with non-violence, there were young revolutionaries who felt that more direct action was needed. They believed that British would not leave India unless they were forced out. And so in 1928, a group of young nationalists founded the Hindustan Socialist Republican Army, HSRA. The meeting was held at Firozshah Kotla ground in Delhi, which is now the Arun Jaitley Stadium. The HSRA was led by some very bold and passionate young people like Bhagat Singh, Jatin Das, Ajoy Ghosh. These revolutionaries were not fighting for fame. They were ready to give up their lives for the freedom of India. In April 1929, Bhagat Singh and Batukeshwar Dutt threw a bomb in the Central Legislative Assembly in Delhi. But this was not to hurt anyone. The bomb was low intensity and their goal was to make a loud statement against British rule, not to kill. They shouted "Inqilab Zindabad," threw leaflets in the air explaining their cause, and stood still and let themselves be arrested. That's right, they wanted to be caught so they could use the court as a stage to tell the world about British injustice. Later that year, there was also an attempt to blow up a train carrying Lord Irwin, the British Viceroy. Bhagat Singh was only 23 years old when he was tried and sentenced to death by British. During the trial, he gave a powerful statement: "To the altar of this revolution, we have brought our youth as incense, for no sacrifice is too great for so magnificent a cause." That means they had offered their youth, their lives to the fight for freedom, just like incense is offered on an altar. They were willing to die for this great cause. Bhagat Singh didn't love violence. In fact, he said he didn't want to promote the cult of bomb and pistol, but he believed that India needed a revolution, not just to remove the British, but to change society. He dreamt of a country with equality, justice, and respect for workers and farmers. Bhagat Singh's famous slogan, "Inqilab Zindabad," meant "Long live the revolution." It became a rallying cry for generations of Indians fighting for justice. Let's now see who participated in the civil disobedience movement and why. So picture this. We are in the Indian countryside during the 1930s. Some farming communities like the Patidars in Gujarat and the Jats in Uttar Pradesh were doing pretty well. They were rich peasants, meaning they owned land and grew commercial crops like cotton and sugarcane. But then came a big problem, a trade depression. That means price of crops suddenly dropped. So imagine you are a farmer who worked hard all season and now your crops are selling for almost nothing. Your cash income disappears, but the government still says you must pay land taxes. Naturally, these farmers were angry. So when Gandhiji started the civil disobedience movement in 1930, these rich peasants joined in enthusiastically. They helped organize protests and even encouraged or pressured others to join boycotts. For them, Swaraj meant freedom from unfair taxes. But here's the twist. In 1931, the movement was called off after the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, but the British didn't agree to reduce land revenue. So these rich peasants felt betrayed. They had fought hard and got nothing in return. So when Gandhiji restarted movement in 1932, they refused to join because they had lost trust. When rich peasants were upset about high land taxes, the poorer peasants, those with very little land or even no land of their own, had a different struggle. Many of them were tenants. That means they didn't own the land, instead they rented it from landlords and had to pay rent regularly for farming. But then came the Great Depression. Prices fell, income dropped, and these small farmers had less and less cash. It became super hard to pay rent to the landlords. So what did they want? They wanted their unpaid rent to be cancelled, or as we say, remitted. Now here's the interesting part. These poor peasants often joined radical movements that were more extreme and were often led by socialist and communist leaders. These groups promised to fight for the poor and cancel rent altogether. What about the Congress Party? Well, the Congress was a big national party and it did not want to upset the rich peasants and landlords, who were also part of the freedom movement and supported Congress. So the Congress usually didn't support the no rent campaigns led by the poor peasant. That made the relationship between the poor peasants and the Congress a bit shaky. Let's rewind to World War I. While the war was tough for many, it was actually a time when Indian merchants and industrialists made huge profits. Why? Because with global trade disrupted, Indian industries got a chance to grow. So after the war, these industrialists wanted to expand their businesses even more. But there was a problem. British colonial policies still had a tight grip on trade. The British controlled imports, exports, and currency policies in a way that favored British businesses, not Indian ones. So what did Indian businessmen do? In 1920, they formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress, and in 1927, the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. These were big groups to represent their business interests. Leaders like Purushottam Das, Thakur Das, and G.D. Birla stepped up. They spoke out against British control over the Indian economy. So when Gandhiji launched the civil disobedience movement in 1930, these business leaders supported it. They gave money to support the movement. They refused to buy or sell imported goods, especially British goods. For them, Swaraj meant a future where Indian trade and industry could grow without colonial restriction. But wait, their support didn't last forever. After the Second Roundtable Conference failed, things changed. There were militant protests happening, businesses were disrupted for long periods, younger Congress leaders were starting to support socialist ideas, which scared many big businessmen. So over time, many business groups pulled back. They still wanted independence, but they didn't want violence or socialism to affect their profits and stability. So far, we have talked about farmers, landlords, and business people. But what about the workers in factories, railways, and mines? These are the people who call the industrial working class, the ones doing tough jobs in cities, mills, railways, docks, and mines. You think they'll join the freedom struggle too, right? Well, most of them didn't, at least not in big number. Why? One big reason is that the Congress had grown closer to industrialists, the big business owners, and since workers often had problems with those same industrialists, they felt left out. So many workers stayed aloof. That means they kept their distance from the civil disobedience movement. But here's the interesting part. Some workers still joined in. Not everywhere, but in places like Nagpur, workers showed strong support. Some railway workers went on strike in 1930, dock workers struck in 1932, and in Chodra Nagpur, thousands of tin mine workers wore Gandhi caps and joined boycott campaigns and protest rallies. These groups didn't always follow everything the Congress said. Instead, they picked part of Gandhiji's ideas like boycotting foreign goods and used them as tools in their own fight for better wages and conditions. Now here's a key point. The Congress leadership was careful not to fully support workers' demand. Why? Because they didn't want to upset the industrialists who were also supporting the movement. Congress worried that adding workers' issues to their official plan might divide the movement and weaken the united fight against the British. So when we think of freedom fighters, we often picture men leading protests, right? But during the civil disobedience movement, something amazing happened. Thousands of women stepped forward and joined the fight for independence. Let's start with the Salt March in 1930. As Gandhiji marched to Dandi, women came out in large numbers to listen to him speak. For many, it was the first time they stepped out of their homes for a political cause. So what did they do? They joined protest marches, they made salt illegally, breaking the British law. They boycotted foreign goods like cloth and liquor, and many were even sent to jail. In the cities, these women were often from upper caste educated families. In villages, they mostly came from rich peasants' households. Why did they join? Because they were deeply inspired by Gandhiji's message. They started to believe that serving the nation was a sacred duty, something they could do as women with pride. Even though women participated in huge numbers, this didn't lead to real change in how women were treated in society. Gandhiji still believed that a woman's main role was taking care of home, be a good mother, being a good wife. He welcomed their help in the movement, but didn't push for full equality. And what about the Congress party? They were happy to have women in protest and rallies, but when it came to leadership roles, like being part of decision making, women were often left out. The Congress wanted them to be symbolic figures, not leaders. So even though the movement gave women a voice in the public space, the real change in the mindset and equality still had a long way to go. That's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. You'll find the notes on your screen. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss more cool history lessons. Thank you.